Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Quote, diverse beliefs about the role of gender in marriage are held by reasonable and sincere people based on decent and honorable religious or philosophical premises. Therefore, Congress affirms that such people and their diverse beliefs are due proper respect. Where's that from? Anybody know? Anybody know where that's from? Diverse beliefs about the role of gender in marriage are held by reasonable and sincere people based on decent and honorable religious or philosophical premises. Therefore, Congress affirms that such people and their diverse beliefs are due proper respect.
Is that from the Vatican?
Interesting. That's from the quote-unquote Respect for Marriage Act that was signed into law by Biden last week, which is not dissimilar to dicta in the Obergefell decision that began the formal redefinition of marriage. So wait a second. Democrats are celebrating this. They brought out their drag queen friends and everybody else for the signing.
John Lemon brought out his fiance, but I don't think that's going to work. Their relationship.
Pelosi was saying tolerance is patronizing. Nothing short, implicitly arguing nothing short of celebration is required to be a decent person. But that's not what Democrats voted for. That's the language in the law. Because, to understand it from the perspective of the larger culture, you oppose the redefinition of marriage, then you're a bigot. Everything is you're a right-wing bigot if you disagree with my redefinition or deconstruction of something. But that's not actually what the law says. Gosh, if only there were some Republicans who were actually willing to take up these battles in a sensible way. And even this, is sort of accepting, a patting on the head after a total and complete defeat, including at the hands of a dozen Republican senators. For more on this topic, nobody wants to talk about this. Even those who voted against it and who have maintained their support for the proper definition of marriage, even they don't want to talk about why. Scott McKay is going to help us answer that why question. He's the publisher at Hayride, contributor to the American Spectator, and author of the Revivalist Manifesto. Scott, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Morning, Dan. Morning, Amy.
Morning.
Merry Christmas to all of y'all.
Merry Christmas to you all as well. What about this? Why doesn't anybody want to talk about marriage? I thought we're in the midst of a culture war. I see a lot of Republicans railing against Drag Queen Story Hour and the trans cult in K through 12, but they're silent here.
Well, I think to some extent these guys have been beaten so badly on the marriage issue, and it was such a failure by the political class on a cultural issue that's the reason they don't want to talk about it. What drives me so nuts about the passage of this with these 12 Republicans in the Senate is that they didn't get anything for it. This is a core Democrat issue, and it may be something that, the Bush Republican crowd that still controls 15 or 20 Senate seats on the Republican side. They don't care about this enough to fight on it, but get something for it, right? Get the reinstatement of the military troops that didn't want to take the jab, or get some spending thing, or get some Republican priority. The wall get built at the southern border. Get the Democrats to agree on something you want in return for giving them something they want.
They did.
And this is what...
No, they did. They got an attaboy from the Democrats. They got you're a good Republican, and that's really all they want. Right. They just want the status.
Right. Got a nice write-up in Politico or The Hill.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And that, that's the thing that is, and I think this marks this entire political era that started in 1932 is the Republican Party refuses to bargain for its own voters. And look, you may look at the polling and may say, well, fighting on the gay marriage issue is a political loser. Well, fine, but at least extract a price to the Democrats for the legislative victory that you just handed them.
What's interesting?
Make them give you something.
What's interesting is it's funny because the Democrats didn't take that position when marriage redefinition was a political loser for them.
Correct.
They never have a problem taking up a political loser if it fits into their, ideological agenda. And here, the other opportunity here is, even though this was a fait accompli, it was an opportunity for people like me, which I did, to remind people who just folded immediately on this issue. It's no big deal. It doesn't matter. That this is not happening in isolation. You're on a continuum. When the deep thinkers like Jonah Goldberg, who didn't appear to appreciate this, I'll give them civil unions and then we'll call it a day. Right. Like you get to call stop. No, it doesn't work that way. And so just so you know, for you Republicans now that have the temporary courage to take up a culture issue because it's so overwhelmingly supported, the position opposed to this trans cult and removing parents from the decision making with respect to their minor children and so forth. Just because you have the courage to do that now when it's a 75% issue or boys and girls sports, understand they're going to continue to attack. They're going to continue to try to move the center. And this is exactly what they did with marriage. And if you don't stand and fight, then it's going to go the same way as marriage did, which was predicted by those defenders of traditional marriage, that once you let this domino fall, there are more that will follow, and they're following.
Well, that's right. And there's a fundamental failure on the part of way too many on the right to recognize that the left doesn't have a limiting principle. There is no, beyond this is too far out over our skis and we won't push it. And so, one of the problems that these guys have, and I go back to this, I wrote about it in my book, I write about it all the time, is you have a fundamental problem with conservatism, which is that its mantra is standing athwart history yelling stop, right? And the failure is that you don't go on offense. I mean, when the trans crowd was calling people bigots because, like straight people didn't want to date them, and when they started getting into the schools and now they're going to groom kids to alternative sexual lifestyles, that was the opportunity to go back on offense and push these people back. And instead, it's this slow motion roll toward normalizing pedophilia and turning kids trans without their parents' consent and all this other stuff. And there's no pushback on this. I mean, we still, like, for example, and this is related, though not necessarily the exact same thing. Like, we still don't have the list of Johns in the Epstein case. I mean, nobody has been shamed. Nope. There's no public outrage. There's no demand for accountability on these kinds of things. When we as a society have a consensus that sexualizing kids is a bad thing, we're letting them chip away at that, and nobody's doing anything about it. Nobody is making it unpleasant for these people to have done that. So, I mean, if anything, Elon Musk is the only one that's doing anything because he banned all those people from Twitter.
So, Scott, tell us more about this drag queen that was there for the bill signing.
Yeah, the drag queen that posted a whole bunch of things about sexualizing kids, and he's an Antifa affiliated individual and all this. And my take on this is they bring these people to the White House deliberately stoking outrage. And maybe a week or two ago, you probably saw this whole thing where there's a new term the left is using aimed at the right. And of course, everything is about these guys is projection. but the term is stochastic terrorism,
Yeah.
right? Which is where if conservatives say something that is strident or whatever, that is going to stoke random acts of violence and lone wolf terrorism. Of course, that's not something Bernie Sanders is guilty of when James Hodgkinson tries to execute the entire Republican congressional baseball team. That doesn't apply to this. But if Christopher Rufo talks about the trans crowd and the grooming of children, then he's stoking violence against the LGBTQ community, right? And of course, this whole thing is designed to provoke as much outrage and demoralization as possible among normal people, in the hopes that somebody is going to pop off and do something horrible, which then is going to be used as the pretext for dropping the hammer on conservatives, much the way January 6th has been used. I mean, it was a protest that got a little rowdy, and all of a sudden it's an insurrection. We have to put hundreds of people under the jail without bail or trial, right?
Well,
and
Democrats are still claiming that 4 people died that day. And 2 of them had a heart attack, health conditions, and you know about sick Nick. So, I mean, they're still pushing that bull jive and just saying, just making these declarative statements as if they're true.
Well, and they do it because this is one of their core things, is they want to radicalize the right so that they can inflict on our side of the fence all of the things that they have been busily weaponizing against us. The FBI and the Department of Homeland Security and the surveillance state and everything else. They want to prove that emergency that they can then use. I mean, these people, you go talk to them, they're all Maoists. They all believe in the Cultural Revolution, and they just need a pretext to make it work. Otherwise, you would never invite drag queens to the White House.
God, no.
That doesn't serve any purpose politically or public policy or otherwise. This is done for the sole purpose of so irritating people that somebody's going to pop off and do something.
Well, or just to continue, as you say, to mainstream, to normalize, and to the extent that anybody presents an opposing viewpoint, as you said, it's violence, it's stochastic terrorism. And so if you want to be labeled a insurrectionist, if you want to be labeled a stochastic terrorist, if you want to be labeled a right-wing bigot, well, then you go ahead and oppose what we're doing here at the White House or in the school.
Right. And the long game, obviously, is to utterly destroy the nuclear family, because that's it's the little platoons of society is how they used to be referred to. Without a viable nuclear family, the majority of the country is going to be, way more vulnerable and way less likely to oppose efforts at the size of government that these guys are interested in.
He is Scott McKay, publisher at the Hayride, contributor to the American Spectator, and author of the book The Revivalist Manifesto. Scott, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Stay warm out there.
All right, thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer.
You stink.
I think you're going to have a good Christmas, all right?
I like beef and cheese. You don't smell like Santa.
On AM 560. The Answer.
And now, a special announcement from